Hello, Andrew. Welcome to the Founders Podcast Show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
Good, good. No complaints yet. It's morning in New York.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Andrew, we were talking just about a joke you share with founders around the journey to take the right direction. Would you be able to share it with our audience?
Yeah, I tell them a lot of jokes. Probably the one that I can actually share with the audience, because I'm not going to start a podcast with like F-bombs, is the one I tell about, there's an older guy in the middle of the street, kind of looking straight down in the middle of the night.
Mm.
And his friend comes over to him and says, what's going on? What are you doing in the middle of the street? He says, well, I lost $20. So he's like, oh, I'll help you look for it. So they're looking, and about a minute later, like, it's the middle of the street. There's not a lot of places for money to be hiding. So his friend says, I don't see it. Where exactly did you lose the money? And he goes, down that alley. So, well, if
Mm.
you lost the money down the alley, why are we looking for it in the middle of the street? And he goes, well, the
Mm.
light's better. So thank you for the courtesy laugh. So most of the startups that I work with, I'm an accelerator. I get a laugh whether it's funny or not. But the critical thing here, I'm just going to my lighting. I forgot to do that. The critical thing here is what I'm trying to get to them is that we all have our comfort zones, right? So maybe you are a technical founder. So your gut, like the happy place for you, the well-lit place for you is the middle of the street. But what you may need to do more than anything else at this point in your company's juncture is understand your go-to-market, test different marketing strategies. And that's the scary dark alley for you because that's not what you're comfortable with. So that's how I kind of get across in a non-threatening way that a founder, like, dude, you're doing what you're happy and comfortable with. You're not doing what you need to do right now to take your company to the next step.
Very interesting. And thanks for sharing the joke. And I think people who are going through their founder's journey, they would definitely understand it because we all made this mistake at some point of our life. So yeah, that's quite relevant. So Andrew, you have lived almost all the sides of the startup table. You've been founder, you've been investor, you've been an accelerator director, teacher, whatnot. You have also created, I think, 2 companies already from the ground up, right?
Yes.
So let's start from there. Would you be able to share your story around how did you came up with an idea to start your first company? What were the struggles starting it? How did you make it successful? And what was this exit looks like?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. A lot of things in life are luck. A lot of things in life are intention, and a lot of things are, intentions that you're ready for luck. You can actually take advantage of it when it happens. So, I was in business school back in the dawn of time. It was like kind of pre-internet, sort of. I remember seeing my first, like, wow, Netscape. That's kind of cool. If there's ever anything here other than government data sets, this will be huge. So when I came out of business school, they're becoming a startup founder. No one knew what that was. There was one guy in my class that was in VC and no one knew what Ben did. Ironically, I ski with Ben. So now I'm like, oh, I know exactly what you do. I do it too. But at that point, I went out, I was in the consulting world because that seemed like the interesting thing to do at the time. And I had a friend who I went to business school whose brother was starting this company called Bunk One. So Bunk One's what we would call SaaS for summer camps. Password protected photo galleries for kids, messaging systems where, you as a parent could send a message and receive a message, but the kids would be nowhere near like electronics. Like this was hard stuff back in 2000. So I ended up joining the team. I was the third founder of that team. Getting to them was luck. Like I knew I wanted to do something startup-y by that point. I just didn't know how. So I was fortunate in that I had networks and I just kept talking to people and I got onto it. So we did that for 8 years. We went through, if you were paying attention, I joined in 2000. So we went through the 2001 crash. That was no fun. We went without salary for a long time. Ultimately, we did well. And by mid 2006 or so, we were thinking about maybe selling the company. We brought in a banker. He got exactly what I thought was a good deal for it. The main founder, the CEO, wanted more. So I said, you know what, Ari, I'm happy with this deal. If you want more, you should be thrilled to buy me out at this price. So we negotiated an exit. And by 2008, when I was out, getting my last buyout check, if you remember what happened in 2007 and 2008, you'll understand where, Ari's like, I think I should have taken the deal. But this happy ending for them, the company sold in 2016. So, everyone else got out too.
That's nice. That's nice. Would you be able to share number of users, how big you went from zero to, a big
Um,
number?
yeah, I can tell you, we went from like zero camps because everyone starts with zero to a couple
Mm,
thousand camps
wow.
within 5 or 6 years.
That's not bad. And did you engage with any kind of growth hacking technique strategies, or was it pure because of the pain in in the space?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We had a B2B to C model, right, which is a very
Mm,
strong model if you can pull it off. So what it meant in our case was, we would sell to the camps. So we'd go to camp conferences, we make outbound sales, phone calls, met some really interesting people that way. And but in many cases, the camp wouldn't pay for it themselves. They could, but often they would pay part of it, and then they would have the parents pay for other parts, or the parents pay for all of it. And
mhm,
when it came to photo sales, it was all driven by the parents buying the photos that the camps had taken. So we would sign up a camp, and in some cases that would be zero money up front, and then we could market to their user base, their parent community. So B2B to lock them in, and B2C after that to actually convert it to revenue. It's a really strong model if you can make it work. I see that with a lot of my portfolio companies in the real estate property management space. They'll sign up a building, but then they have to sell to residents, so
mm.
it's a cool model. But I'll be honest, back in early 2000, like, no one even knew what the phrase growth
Competition
hacking meant.
wasn't.
It's not that,
Yeah,
we just
yeah,
didn't know.
true. Uh,
There were a couple of blogs out there, like Fred Wilson had one of the early blogs, super sharp guy, very nice guy. But there just wasn't that many. There wasn't like this overwhelming amount of people, for better or for worse, writing about what they
mm,
think matters. So there was a lot of like experiment. There was a lot of like A/B testing on email deliverability. There was a lot of A/B testing on web pages. There was a lot of just sitting around the room and saying like, "Hey, when I'm at a conference and I say we do X, Y, Z, they just keep walking. How do you get them to stop?"
mm. Very interesting. And that's why I love the conversations with matured entrepreneurs like yourself, because you've gone through all the struggles, you have navigated through these trenches, and then you came out of it learning all these things. And one of the quotes which always stays with me, that success doesn't teach you much, because success is mostly about enjoying it. It's all the failures in your life which teaches you everything, right? That makes you powerful. The world is exactly same, it's just you
Mhm.
becomes more stronger to manage that, right?
So the
Great stuff.
phrase that I heard, Ash, was like, experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted.
There you go. There you go. You always get something. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So Andrew, let's move on to the second company then,
Mhm.
which you started. What happened there? Why did you? So obviously you got an exit, and then we all know what happened in 2008. But when you were you doing something at that point of time? How did you came across this opportunity, and what was going on in your mind when you thought, okay, let me start this one now?
Sure, sure. Bearing in mind what I just said about experience, the second startup was a hell of an experience. So let me kind of paint the picture. 2008,
Mhm.
I'm gone. Sorry, end of 2008. I get out, and starting in 2009, I'm working at a family office. Right. So
Mm,
I'm bringing deals to this high net worth individual. I'm managing his private equity funds, his hedge funds, all of whom are like, tanking because of the world meltdown. And, along the way, I'm starting to bring him deals like secondary. Like, I can buy a big chunk of Facebook. This was back when it was the equivalent of a buck 35 a share. Or I'm trying to pitch new startups for him. Not the best time to do it, but if you're liquid when everyone else is not, you can get some great deals. Now,
mm,
unfortunately, the guy I worked with was very, very difficult, right? And not like, oh, he's difficult, but you learn a lot. Just like difficult, like, oh my God, I'm going to bang my head against the wall every night when I come home. So I was looking to get out. So I put the word out there that I'm looking. I might want to do another startup. I had some of my own ideas. And I was approached by someone in my network who kind of like a consultant for startups.
mm,
Going back to what I said before, mix of purposeful and luck. Like, I was being purposeful about getting my name out there. I had started to build my network a bit more, which was a mistake I did during my first startup. Like, I had built it enough, But I was doing stuff during that time at the family office, like writing for Alley Watch and other things that got my name out there. And ultimately, I was recruited to help call it the idea founder, actually put flesh and blood and bones to his idea in a digital memories type startup called Layer Cake. So the idea is like, as parents, we have tons and tons of photos, tons and tons of notes of some sorts, even voice notes if we wanted to. All of these things just exist in this big bucket in the internet, or several big buckets in the internet. And effectively, since they're not organized, they're not tagged, like we really have none of them. It's not like the old days where, you had your album. Your album had 50 photos in it. Those were all the photos you had, so you looked at them. Now we have
Mm,
15,000 photos. We never look at them. So the idea was to solve that problem. And he had this big, bold vision, for like down the road with all the features. So I needed to boil it down to an MVP, which by that point I was really good at. I needed to recruit a CTO, which at that point I had good connections for. I need to pre-sell it to VCs, which at that point I'd gotten a little better at doing. I had it all done. And then he got impatient, right? I knew it was going to take 6 months to come out to market. At 3 months, he's like, I can take it from here. And I said, respectfully, no, you can't. And equally respectfully, that wasn't our deal. Uh, and at that point, it devolved into lawsuits and crying and hurt feelings.
mm, mm. No, I totally understand that. Um, would you be? I know you might not be because of all the legal, aspects of it. Were there any learnings from that kind of interaction experience,
Sure.
which you could share with our audience so that they can learn from your experience?
Yeah. So headline is, and I've heard this is not my phrase. I heard it from someone else. Contracts keep honest people honest. The main reason to write something down is to make sure that you're actually talking about the same thing. Right? You might think you're talking about the same thing when it's all verbal, but until you actually put it on paper, oh, then you realize, oh, we never dealt with this scenario. We never dealt with that scenario. And you flesh them out and like, great, now we agree on something. And if there's a disagreement down the road because it was a gray area in the contract, it's in good faith. It wasn't like I thought X, she thought Y. It was like, oh,
Mm,
neither of us thought about it. So that's great if the fundamental is that you're both trustworthy people, right? Now, once you get into a situation where someone's going to say, I know the contract said X, but guess what? Sue me. It's not going to be worth your while to sue over this. Just roll over and take it. Then, the contract doesn't help you. Right. I'd learned that
mm,
actually a little bit before. I had like a small claims case against like a mover who damaged my couch. I won. I'm like, great, collect. Right. I had to go attach out and I had to go find out who owned their van to like collect against them. Once you're
mm,
in that space, especially if you're a founder, you're often in a situation where life's just too short, right? I mean, your startup's going to be dead because you're wasting too much time in lawsuits. Even if you're still in, ultimately, he ended up killing the startup for other reasons. Uh, but it's just the numbers are usually too small to deal with it.
mm,
I happen to be kind of nasty if I think someone's taking advantage of me, for lack of a better word. So I happen to get a really, really, really good employment lawyer who also thought this was a slam dunk. She'd send a letter on her letterhead. It would be done in 2 weeks. The other party dragged his heels. Then she got mad. And you don't want to see an HR lawyer get mad. It's actually like scary, awesome to watch.
mm. Wow. That's an interesting part because, dealing with people, dealing with all these technicalities, we always think that it's easy because if you're an employer or a founder or a startup,
Mhm.
entrepreneur, you think that you have some kind of leverage, but you don't. You're actually in a losing side of the game when it comes to all the legalities and the rights we have in the
Yeah.
system, isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar with game theory. I don't want to like, put everyone to sleep, but just think of it as at every point, there's like, I can do X and the outcomes could be
Mm,
A or B. I do X or Y, outcomes A or B. But where it gets interesting is something we talk about sub games. So it's like, we don't negotiate with hostage takers, and then they take hostages. Can you really hold to that and not negotiate, or it's the pressure from your constituents can be so strong that you have to? So, like, you could say, I'm going to do X, but then when push comes to shove later in the game, you do Y. So,
Mm,
to take that out of the abstract, I think a little bit more about what happens down the road. Like the contract says, these are my rights. Okay, if they don't do it, then what happens? Right? Where do you
mm,
have leverage in it? And if you're a startup doing a deal with, say, a very large corporate who's going to be your partner, you just have to go into it realizing you don't have any of that leverage, right? There's very little you can do later on. Now, you can flip that a little bit. Like once they're so addicted to your startup that you will pry their cold, dead hands off it, then you have leverage. So, don't be an asshole about it. Pardon my language. But then you have a certain amount of leverage because, like, we're not going back to the old way. So it pays to think through the game at all the stages just to say, hey, I know what the contract says, but where's the real power lie? So that's kind of takeaway number one from that big point. Takeaway number two, or maybe I should flip the order, is just spend more of your time getting to know the people that you're going to work with. Before you even go down that path, before you even worry about who has power when, just try not to get in bed with anyone that you're not really comfortable is like a good person, right? Trustworthy, professional individual. Diligence them through your network. Who's worked with them before? If it's a VC, how did they treat the portfolio companies that didn't succeed, right? What happens when push comes to shove? What are they like? And try to get as good a feel for that as possible before you even bother trying to paper over things with contracts.
yeah, no, definitely. Great. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing both the experience. I think that these are very good for our listeners to understand, like what kind of challenges you might be facing going forward in the similar journey, right? So let's move to the next milestone of your life, which is why did you thought or why did you decided to go forward and write this entrepreneur's odyssey book? Was it because you've gone through the experiences which you thought not everyone in the same space is experiencing it and then you wanted to share that? Or is it more around reaching to the point in your life where you have, okay, I do have everything sorted in my life, my sustainability, my lifestyle, dependencies on me. Something is missing, and that is the happiness I get by helping other. What was this exactly which
Yeah,
meant?
I certainly don't have everything sorted yet. I feel like, I'll give you an example from my friend. He lost his mother at, I think she was 93, and she had tons of projects going on. Like she was renovating the bathroom, she was studying, some other hobbies. And he's like, it was a total mess for me to try to clean any of that up. But I was good with that because if somebody passes and there's not a lot of stuff going on, that kind of means they're just waiting to die, right? If you have a lot of stuff going on, you're still living life richly into its fullness. So I saw a lot going on, right? I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and that's totally okay because I've enjoyed a lot of things along the way, and I'm going to enjoy a lot more. So to take it back to kind of put you in the mindset I was in when I was thinking about the book, um, I had done the two startups with the family office in between. I was on the verge of doing a third startup, and then I got pulled in with Dream It, which at the time was one of the top five accelerators slash VC funds in the world. The
Mhm,
third one ever, right after Y Combinator and Techstars, the archetypical sit your butt in a chair for 3 months and we'll bring you speakers, pizza, beer, demo day model was basically invented by Techstars and Dream It. And I came in to run their New York office. And then I made this kind of interesting change. So I went from being a founder who thought about one company at a time to an angel investor who I got, maybe if I got one or two or three really interesting deals a month, I thought about them and I pulled the trigger on, five, like, kind of interesting. I'm seeing it from the other perspective, but still a handful of companies to suddenly having to look at over 1,000 startups within a 2-month period to pick 10 that I wanted to work with. And then I had those 10
mm,
I'm working with for 3 months, where you do the math. I'm meeting with each one for minimum an hour, and then I've got all the follow-up work, and I'm trying to introduce them to customers. It was a step level, a quantum level upping of my game there. So I started learning other things. I started learning how to do that effectively. And one of the things I learned is that giving advice in the context of a story or a joke was just far more effective. Right? I could tell them, listen, you need to test your cost of customer acquisition. Your company lives and dies on it. I looked at your model. Here's what happens if, you know, if we change the conversion from freemium to premium just by a little bit, like your company dies. I could tell you that. Or I could tell them the story of this company that was a blog discovery platform. They had this whole model, everything was ready to go. Well, everything but the premium features. And they're like, oh, we're going to go just build. And then in 2 months, we'll have it, we'll roll it out. And I'm like, dude, you're going to get the demo day. And if you don't have those metrics in place, what are you going to show them? I'm like, oh, that's a good point. What do
Mm,
we do? So I said, instead, what you do, and actually, there's two stories. So I'm going to tell the other story that happened before me. This is my partner, Mark. He's saying this. Mark tells this blog discovery platform, like, if you want to, you can test that right now, right? You
mm,
go up there, you put hey, here's what the premium is. Here's how much it costs. Buy now. And when people click the buy now button, you can say, I don't have a merchant account. Doesn't matter. I say, hey, Ash, guess what? 2 months free on us. But it doesn't matter that you're not taking the money because to the customer, it looked exactly like they were purchasing. So now you know exactly what your conversion from free to premium is. And you can go back and plug that into the model and see if the model works. And like, oh, what happened? Right. Because now the story, they want to know how the story ended. So I said, they came back a week later and they said, we're screwed. Right. We're like a tenth of where we need to be on conversion, but we have an idea. Instead of being a blog discovery platform, can we help people find the best seats in sporting events or concerts, because that's where a lot of the blogs they were directing people were to, and they figured we got a lot of people there. Let's do that. So that company ultimately became SeatGeek. And if they had gone and done it the way they thought they were going to do, build, see what happens, rather than stop, don't build, test, SeatGeek never would have been. Now
mm.
I tell these other startups that story, and it's just like, oh my God, we got to test this yesterday. So I told that to another company. They were tools for startups to tell their stories and make decks better. They didn't have a merchant account. They said, doesn't matter. We're going to test it the same way SeatGeek did. They hit their number and they were able to keep going. But I learned that you embed those ideas in the stories, it just makes it's more powerful, which by the way, when you think about it, every religion known to man starts with stories. They don't start with, hey, here are the 10 things you can't do, right? Or,
Mm,
they don't start like a constitution with, here are your rights. They start with a Genesis story. So it's just a more effective
indeed.
way to do it. So, sorry, this turned into a long answer. I had that as the experience I was picking up when I'm running the accelerator. And then things started to click because I remember back when I was in business school, I read a book called The Goal. And The Goal, for those of you not familiar with it, was very popular in business schools in the 80s and 90s, and a little less so today. But it was a novel written about a guy who was sent to turn around a printing plant that was failing somewhere in the Midwest. Totally over his head, didn't know what to do. He meets this mentor, this consultant on an airplane who kind of mentors him through the process. And completely unrealistically doesn't try to charge him, but that's a different point. So I'm like, I got it, right? That book, the only book that I remember from business school, because it was written like a novel, but it was actually a textbook for strategy and operations. So that was memorable. The stories I'm telling to help startups understand where they need to focus, those are effective, more effective than just a how-to guide or blind advice. If I ever write kind of the accumulated wisdom I have on what it takes to build a startup, I'm going to write that as a novel. I'm going to write the goal for the startup journey. So that's where it all came together. That's why I decided to write it this way. Plus, between you and me, Ash, a lot of business books are just deathly boring. Right? They're just really hard to read. They're the same kind of dorky, earnest, ghost written anecdote, 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 name drop, name drop, name drop, 1 page chapter summary. Like it makes my eyes glaze over. So I can only imagine what it does to people who, you know, everyone else out there who's reading 5 or 6 of them just to glean key insights from them. So I wasn't going to
Mm.
write that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you because I read tons of books every year, and I think I can literally name few of them on my fingers, for example. I think Profit First was one of the books which I've read, which I
Mhm.
really like. The Nudge, The Tools of Titans, and I'm thinking to read Pitch Everything later this year. So these are the few books which I thought was really, really helpful
Yeah.
to run my business and learn from them. Otherwise, you're absolutely spot on like anecdote. It's a format basically for every writer
Yeah.
nowadays because they know that this kind of work.
Well, by the way, I'll
Okay,
take it one
great.
step further. Even the
Yeah.
good ones, like I read a book called Who, which was very, it was about, how you actually recruit top players. And it's actually great content, but it was hard to read. It was hard to read. Even
Mm,
the good ones are hard to read.
mm. Yeah, because we have to make the reader's life easier by making it easy to read instead of making it harder for them to read and understand and
Yeah.
potentially learn from
Amen.
it, right? Yeah. Great. So let's move on to the next part of our interview then. Andrew, a lot of people nowadays want to get into startup or founder space. The reason behind it is not just 2008, but there is a consistent crunch of feeling in the market right now. So, for example, a couple of years back, we heard this news around Amazon fired 15,000 people. That affected
Mhm.
the whole market in UK. Last year, Microsoft fired 11,000. And more these things are happening. People get into their habits of being comfortable. They live in $1 million houses, they drive Teslas or Range Rovers. They don't necessarily need that. It's just because they work for these big giant companies, they can, acquire the capital through the salary or other formats of payment. They get habitual of it. But this the sudden hit makes them think that this is not necessarily my journey I might have want to do something different in my life. People want to get into the startup space, but they're not clear how. Or I shouldn't say let's talk about why and then let's talk about how.
Awesome. You actually raised like 5 or 6 interesting topics. So let's start with which may be a little late for a lot of your audience who are already doing it, but let's start with the like, should I do this at all? So let me
Mm,
give you a kind of a persona. I'm sure a lot of your audience will identify with this because this is where they started, right? They're working for a large company. Maybe they're in an office. Maybe they're in a cube. They're dealing with one relatively important or very important part of what they do, and it's just horribly painful. All right. So they have some variation of there's got to be a better way. The light bulb goes off. Oh, I think I have a better way. So then what do they do? So uh, you got to decide, right? Do you have the temperament and the hunger and the desire to leave the comfortable environment you're in and go start a startup? And I'm going to say something that's a little bit maybe controversial here because we're also gung ho about like, it's great, do it, live your dreams, right? I'm going to say it's not for everybody, right? There's a lot of stress there, especially if you're in the stage of life you're talking about. I got a mortgage, right? I got 2 kids in private school, right? My wife is also on commissions, like she's a real estate agent, right? Doesn't have health insurance through her, through her company. That's more of a US issue, I know. Um, Maybe it's not right for you. Maybe you're just not comfortable with that level of risk at that point in your life, and you shouldn't do it. Or
mm,
maybe you're worried about all that, but you just don't know what the day to day is. Like you've seen the Facebook movie as like, oh, like dramatic, or you've read the Steve Jobs like biopics. Like that's really cool. But that's not what the real startup journey is like. A startup journey is a lot of staring at a computer. It's a lot of people telling you no. So the other benefit of writing, my book as a novel was that you actually get the feel for what it's like. You got in your gut, you can kind of say, you know what? I don't know if I can see myself doing that. Or, oh yeah, I can do
mm,
that. So to answer the first of your points, um, yeah, it's not for everybody, but there needs to be, and I think I've written a way for people to decide, like, is this for me or not? So that was point number one. Point number two, which is kind of a bigger issue, which is kind of the the ebbs and flows of the startup market. It gets really hot. People are excited. Everyone wants to come in. Then all of a sudden there's a crash, a reversal, and then all of a sudden like everyone's scared and they leave. Right? It's kind of the waves. They come in, the tides come in, the tides come out. A lot of people get caught up in the excitement. They come in where everything's great, and then like they leave because like, oh, that's nuts. I can't do this. Right? I'm not getting funding in the 3 months people like told me it would take, so I'm out. So there's a lot of that. You just got to understand that, understand what it's really like and understand if you have what it takes to stick to it is what matters. But there's an interesting side effect, right? So let's do a little thought experiment. Let's say you were an alien and you're looking down on the earth in 1960. And instead of like, I don't know, ripping up cattle or making circles in the crops fields, you're like, they're on the verge of a really interesting startup revolution. Venture capital is going to explode. Startups are going to explode. Their whole world's going to change. Where do I think it's going to happen? What's the epicenter going to be? So you as that alien might think, well, I want a place that has good concentration of capital, right? Because you need money to make it work, but really well-educated workforce. Maybe they got a lot of universities nearby. And then maybe the headquarters of a lot of the big companies that can be customers. So you'd look around the globe and maybe New York would be your first choice, arguably London also, but let's take the US, right? You'd say New York. Would you pick like this like unincorporated, not even close suburb of San Francisco? Never in a million years. Like, okay, you got some schools out there, but it's all spread out and like there's no customers in Palo Alto. And when you compare like the capital and the customers between San Francisco and New York, no. You put your money on New York, maybe on Boston, right?
Mm,
Didn't play out that way. And there's I don't really have a lot of great theories. One of my theories is like the first wave of innovation required hardware, which means you need a garage to work in, and we don't have garages in the city. So maybe that was it. Or maybe it was just a matter of at that very beginning where everything is like a green field, little things snowball. I got lucky with one startup. They made some money. Then all those founders went out and started their new startups. And it's just kind of a little bit luck of the draw where that, the snowball rolled this way instead of that way. So San Francisco and the Bay Area became like the leader in that space. But then 2008 happened, right? So there's something
mm,
really interesting in New York. Before 2008, if you were a super sharp person, quantitative or very entrepreneurial, you're probably going into finance, hedge fund. Right? I'm gonna start a quant fund. I'm gonna make a ton of bucks, and it's a lot less risky than these startup things that people are talking about. So the best and the brightest and the most talented and the most risk tolerant went into these financial services. And then the big crash comes with Lehman, and all of a sudden, like, oh, my job's not that secure after all. And then at the same time, like everyone's making like boku bucks with a lot of the consumer facing startups in the Bay Area. So like not as safe as I thought. And oh, this could actually be a lot bigger than I thought. So a lot of talent migrated from kind of the financial services sector into the startup world during that crash. A big change in mindset. And it wasn't soon thereafter, it wasn't long thereafter that New York overtook Boston as the number 2 startup ecosystem. And now, depending on the type of startup you're doing, the answer might be no, you stay in New York, right? And maybe get some money from people in San Francisco, or maybe they already have an office in New York because they have to be in both places. But that's kind of the second point you were making about like these crashes sometimes do interesting things to the ecosystem and to people's perception of what's riskier and what's a better opportunity.
indeed, indeed, definitely. Let's also talk a little bit more about the strategies you have mentioned in your book, because Andrew, I think it's a great idea to read a book which is easy to read and understand it from perspective of somebody who has lived it in practical world, but also understand what kind of value people will get if they go through this. One thing which I loved about Mike's Profit First is now I have set idea in my brain that if I go and start a new business, this is how I have to structure my banking or
Mhm.
my sales and marketing and everything in my business. Is there something similar, or in contrast, is there something which this which your book actually gives as a value to the readers, which do you think could stick with their mind for the life?
Yeah. So uh, conceptually, I like founders to think about their startup like a chain rather than as a rope. So let's kind of unpack that a little bit. Like a rope has a lot of strands to it. And you've, I'm sure, seen like ropes that are like a couple of strands are frayed and broken, but the rope's still holding. Right? Sometimes it's holding on by a thread, right? That's a common saying. But a rope will still hold, even if some individual strands are not, sound. That's not a startup. A startup's more of a chain. If any one link
Mm,
in the chain is broken, the startup's not going to work. So you might have the best go to market out there, but if your market size is too small, it's not going to happen, right?
mm,
Or if your solution isn't a quantum level better than the alternative, is just a minor improvement, doesn't matter if everything else is great. So as a VC, especially when I started looking at those 1,000 startups as applicants to an accelerator program, I got very good at, I guess, or very focused on just scanning the chain. Where are the weak links? I don't need to dig into the market size right now. I think it's big enough. I'll deal with that later. But I don't think the go to market's going to work. I don't think their CAC is low enough relative to LTV. I need to focus my effort there. So if you're a startup, you have to think about the chain kind of holistically, right? What parts of my business, and then of course the pitch deck that represents my business, are potentially weak links or might be perceived as weak links in the investor's eyes, and how do I address that? So that's kind of the overarching mentality of, if you're going to be into a startup, that's how you got to think about it.
mm. Very interesting. Great. And was there anything you thought or you experienced with somebody whom we were helping as a mentor, as a guide, as a coach,
Hmm.
which you might thought would be helpful for our listeners in the case of a new founder, like a first time founder?
Sure, sure. So um, I wish I could remember where I learned this. It's called an index card prototype of your site.
Mm,
I wish I could
mm,
remember where I learned it so I can give credit for it. It is a chapter in the book under customer discovery. So let me kind of explain. I'll give a little background. So the startup in the book is called Qualjar. It's actually loosely based on a startup that I'm working on the side. It's a speech to text startup. As a funny aside, I actually wrote about 80% of the book speech to text directly to Google Docs. So it's a book about a fictional speech to text startup based on a real speech to text startup that I wrote 80% of using speech to text. That's a little meta. But so the founder has this idea of what he wants it to do. He's talking to his mentor, and his mentor is talking to, well, who's your ideal customer profile? He thinks it's going to be like a B2B company. They talk up through it. It's like, no, it's wrong because of X, Y, and Z, right? They go through like visualizing what that persona would do. And he changes his focus, mini pivot, to the kind of on the go professional who is juggling their phone and trying to take notes at the same time while they're running to a different job site, like a real estate agent or a general contractor. So once he's got that and he's kind of rethinking what the app looks like, he goes through a process where he's actually sketched out what each screen of the app looks like. And not even photorealistic, just like a pencil sketch, like using Balsamic or one of those tools out there. And the process he goes through is he finds, a bunch of people, 20 plus people, but in the story, there's one chapter, real estate agent, super busy. And he says to this woman, he says, listen, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put these index cards in front of you. Each index card is a screen. I'm going to put one in front of you, and I want you to interact with that card as if it's your phone. So if there's a button, touch it. I can't read your mind. So I just want you to verbalize what you're thinking. I won't answer your questions because I'm not going to be there when you have
mm,
this app. But I want you to talk like, oh, I'm not sure what this button does, or oh yeah, I need to do X first. Just say that out loud so I understand what's going through your mind when you're doing stuff. And depending on what you press, I'll give you a different index card. That'll be a different screen that you get to. So for the cost of a pack of index cards, he was able to run through the user interface with a customer, understand what parts were confusing, what parts were not, what features people actually cared about, and which ones nobody cared about. So he didn't have to build those. And then also understand where the hesitations might be. Like, oh, I'm not sure about what happens at this point. I'm afraid to go on. Or I need to understand what you're going to do privacy wise with this information before I trust you. So he's able to get all that information without coding a single line. And you can do it fast. That's one of the learnings that, I wish I had learned before my first startup. We did it exactly backwards and wasted a ton of money. I wish I could remember who to thank for that because it's an awesome idea. But if you read the book, you can thank me for it because it's like chapter 7 or something.
Great stuff. Cool. Well, Andrew, thank you very much for sharing all these wisdom with our listeners. We have another part in our episode, which is called the lightning round. We got 6 quickfire questions for you prepared. At any stage, if you feel like you don't want to answer any of them, just give me a skip and then we move to the next one. How does that sound?
Sure. Why not? Sounds like fun.
Great. Okay. Question number 1. What are the top 3 strategies to find out if you want to do a particular startup or not as a founder in 2025?
Got it. Best thing to do is work with a startup. Maybe not as a startup, but a prior startup where you're close to the founders. You'll see what it's like. You'll see firsthand what the stresses are. You'll see firsthand what actually happens day to day. Not what you think it is, but what the actual flow of work is. Full stop. Best way to do it. Second thing you should have, especially if it's a B2B startup, is domain expertise. It's very hard to sell, say, to real estate developers if you haven't been working in the industry for 5 years, 10 years, know the lingo. So if you're thinking about doing it and you don't have that expertise, maybe you take a 2 or 3 year, prelude and start working on that. And the third thing, buy my book. Let me roll that back a little bit. The third thing you do is there's tons of resources out there. There's a lot of resources out there. So go out and learn from other people's mistakes. Now, the tricky part is the quality of a lot of that advice varies. Some people are great. Some people don't know what they're talking about. And if you do find it, it's usually fragmented between like a blog post here and a blog post there. So you're trying to stitch together kind of cohesive, like this is all I need to know, which is kind of why I wrote the book. So you don't have to do that.
Indeed, indeed. And then my next question was around the book also. So the question is, what book would you recommend to our audience and why?
So it depends on, obviously, so as a VC, the phrase we use most often is it depends. But if you are a founder who's been working on a startup for a while and is ready to go and to raise money, but doesn't really understand or doesn't know enough about how VCs operate and what they're looking for and kind of what's happening on that other side of the table so you can relate and be effective. There's a book I read over 10 years ago called Mastering the VC Game by Jeff Busgang. Well written. It covers like things like, we have a 3-year investment period. After 3 years, we're probably not making initial investments. So feel free to ask, like, how long has it been since you've raised? How much dry powder you have? It was, at that point in my career, it was a real eye opener for like what that other person I was talking to, who I had just think, they're a pile of cash, right? But, what actually motivates them, what the constraints they're in, how they're rewarded. So it's a really great book if you're at that stage in your startup.
Awesome. Great stuff. Thank you for that. I might add that into my Kindle. I have kind of like a playlist on Spotify where I keep adding the books to read through one by one. So thanks for that.
Sure.
What's
Right after
one?
the Entrepreneur's Odyssey. That's, it could be the next book in your playlist.
There you go. There you go. Great stuff. What's an attribute or a characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
Again, I heard this from somebody and I can't remember who told me, so I apologize for not citing my sources. But I like a founder who has well-reasoned but loosely held theories, beliefs. So for example, I ask a startup, okay, you're going to target, the real estate developers who are doing projects between $1 and $5 million. Why that instead of the bigger guys? Well, these guys generally don't have any software solving the problem I'm talking about. The bigger guys have something, maybe it's homegrown, maybe it's like a partial solution, but it's harder to get them to switch than it is to get these new guys who are greenfield opportunities to, adopt tech. Like, okay, that's a well-reasoned opinion. Now, let's say I come back to him and I say, actually, I work with a lot of really large developers. And I got to tell you, like the solutions you think they use, 99% of them aren't using anything. We should get in front of them and see how they feel. So a kind of a founder who's half good will then justify, no, 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 it's not the case. You got to do this, that, the other thing, right? They're kind of stuck into, their original conception. The really good founders will be like, that's interesting. That's new data. How can we test this? Tell you what, set
Mm,
me up with 10 informational interviews with these guys. Let me see what they use. So that's what I mean by well reasoned but loosely held opinions.
indeed. What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
Speech to text, speech to text. It's just so much faster. And it's gotten to the point where the transcription errors are probably less embarrassing than my typos and the autocorrects.
Mm, interesting. Oh, I use dictation on the word when I'm writing something,
Okay.
but I'm guessing this is also a good idea to create content and potentially, uh, get the word out there, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell
Cool.
you, like, in addition to the book, I've written maybe 70 articles in the startup press or the trade press. You know how
Hmm.
I write them? I'm in the subway on the way to another meeting and I'm dictating right into my notes app. That's my first draft of almost every article I've ever written.
Awesome. Awesome. That's actually really good idea. I can do that while I'm traveling in the trains and,
Mhm.
that's cool. Great. What's a new or a crazy business idea you would love to pursue if you had time?
For myself or ones that I'm looking to back right
Hmm.
now.
Well, let's say you won't back something up if you don't believe in it, right? So,
Sure. Okay. I'll give you two answers for that. There's a deal I'm looking at right now. They make robots that clean the trash chutes in office and multifamily rentals. Or
mm,
condos too, right? Doesn't matter. So instead of just pouring disinfectant down or deodorant down the shaft every night, and then like twice a year having some professional's manual service cleaning it, this is a robot. It kind of stays in its like little layer at the top of the trash chute. And at 3 a.m., it locks all the doors and it comes down, scrubs the walls. If there's ever a blockage, right, carton got jammed in sideways, it locks the doors, it comes down, it knocks it out before it becomes a big jam with everything else piled up behind it. And the economics are kind of the same as the old school way of doing it. It's just really cool. My kids think it's the most boring thing ever, but I think it's really cool. So I'm working on that deal right now for myself and for maybe a lot of the founders in the audience. I've worked on and off a tool that makes getting warm introductions to the right investors for your startup easier. So many people do this poorly. Like the cold email, the spray and pray, like it just pisses us off, to be brutally
mm,
honest, right? If you were selling a $50,000 software package to a large company, you would spend hours of research before you sent that email out. But you want 10 times that much money or 100 times that much money from an investor, you're sending out the same generic, I did zero research email. Right. And the best thing I can say for it is we're not going to open it anyway, so we won't remember you if you reach out to us later. So the right way to do it is you go through your potential lists of potential investors, however you get it. You're looking at their investments to make sure they are in fact relevant to you. And then you're finding through your network, through LinkedIn or what have you, the right people who could put you in front of that. Say, Ash, I know you know Fred Wilson at Union Square Ventures. Can you make an intro? Right? And you
mm,
make that easy. All of that is amenable to automation. The tricky part is LinkedIn's API doesn't let you have access to second degree contacts. So I banged my head up against that wall on and off. I've tried different other tools, used AI in more creative ways. But one of these years, I'd like to actually build that out properly.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I mean, usually the first stop for founders to go to find investors is network. So they have different hosted clouds. I think for one for Europe, one for
Hmm.
US, one for Asia, like everything. And then the moment you register, you have to like subscribe to it. So, I don't know, it's $200 or something a month or something, and then you get like tons of leads, tons of investors coming to you every day. Oh, we are interested, and you find out later after spending so many hours that okay, there are other people either trying to sell you something or there are
Hmm.
conmans. I'm
Yep.
not saying there are not genuine investors there are, but mostly you don't find genuine investors just by putting your pitch somewhere online and then just letting people pour in. You have to do all the hard work, right?
There's no magic
um,
bullet. Crowdfunding also, it's not a magic bullet. I've got one company that's been very effective with it, but by and large, like, you got to do the legwork. I mean, if it was easy,
you gotta
everyone
do
would
it
do
like
it.
that. Yeah, exactly. Wait, and then last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
Well, I mean, there's lots of interesting things are fun to me, right? But let me see what would be fun for other people. Um, I guess as one of my hobbies is military history. So like when
Mm.
I'm not reading, unfortunately, business books, or I'm not reading like sci-fi or fantasy to unwind, or I'm not reading kind of like select nonfiction that I've missed that a lot of people have recommended, my go-to will be like reading about like Xerxes' campaign against the Greeks, or what really happened at the Battle of Agincourt.
That's interesting. Reading. I think more and more easy access to more entertainment and these dopamine hits is just making humans in general, I'm talking about, uh, very anti boredom, but in reality boredom actually gives you the creative juices in your brain. It gives you that feeling of being creative, and one of the things which I found really interesting is reading. So yeah, definitely if you have something similar
Yeah.
to that kind of
Well,
hobby, it just helps.
I'll build on that a little bit, right? So I agree 100%. You can't hear yourself think until you create a quiet space for it. So if you're constantly listening to other things, I mean, it's great, but if you're constantly doing and reading and watching and listening, you're not actually hearing yourself yet. So
Mm.
of my secret weapons on this is actually Sabbath. So I observe Sabbath. I turn my phones off, my computer off, the TV off. Yeah. Right. So, I'll go out for a run in the morning before services, but I'm running without my phone, without listening to anything. So I am
Hmm.
entirely in my own head at that point. And, if you've ever been to like Jewish services, they're long. So there's a lot of times where I've zoned out and I'm entirely in my head there. But creating that space, whether it has to be a religious observance or even just, one day in seven disconnected is not a bad thing. Reconnect with family, with yourself. That can pay huge dividends.
Definitely. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your wisdom with all our listeners. If people want to get in touch with you, people want to learn from you, what is the best way to do it?
So number one, you can come to my website. It's still a little bit of a work in progress. It's Andrew, B as in boy, Ackerman.com. That'll tell you a little bit more about myself. It'll also, totally self-serving plug. It'll show you how to get the book. If you are investing, if you have a startup that might be relevant to me, first stop, go to my LinkedIn profile. On the LinkedIn profile, it says right front and center what I invest in. If you're in that space, you can reach out to me, send me an email. It's again, Andrew B. Ackerman at gmail.com. Just say, I saw you on Founders Podcast, you know, Founders Podcast, follow up dash company name, right? And it's like, hey, I saw you on that. My startup does 2 or 3 sentences, get it right front and center, and then we can talk. But if you're not in my space, like you're, I don't know, ad tech startup, and I don't do that, you know, probably not the best person for you to reach out to. In that case, buy the book and it'll tell you, how to find the right people to reach out to.
Definitely, definitely. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey and the impactful work you're doing in the Founders space. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Founders Podcast.
Thanks for having me and great questions. Thank you.